What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the second album by rock band Foo Fighters, and basically this album is called The Color and the Shape, and it came out in the spring of 1997. This is a pretty seminal standard rock album from the mid late 90s and stuff. When you think of albums like No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom and like Kid Rock's Devil Without a Cause and like Blink 182's like The Enema of the State and some of those type ones, definite kind of staples of like standard mid late 90s kind of rock fare and that type of stuff. Foo Fighters was one where they actually spawned in 1995 and they manifested about late 1994 after the aftermath of Nirvana and stuff. But their first album, 1995 self-titled Foo Fighters, was kind of like a more leftover grunge type album that had a lot more just after effects of not quite nearing. Like I feel like it seems like Foo Fighters is one of the ones responsible for ushering in post grunge, considering that they had so much. Dave Grohl kind of had so much to do with grunge back in like the early 90s and stuff, and this kind of felt like the page turner, where this was kind of like a central kind of project in page turning things, where bands like Nickelback and Puddle of Mud and Stained and bands like that were kind of starting to usher in like post grunge as far as that started to get popular between like the mid late 90s and early 2000s, especially as far as that kind of went. But this is kind of one that, like I said, kind of feels like a page turner. It was one that kind of was central for kind of not wholesomely ditching the grunge sound. There are some songs that kind of give me like slight and kind of mild Nirvana vibes, but it's not quite as much of an offshoot of that. It's not quite as much of an offshoot of that as like their 1995 album kind of was. And that's just kind of the thing about it, where these songs are more crafted for like standard rock radio, and they just feel a lot more seminal. They definitely feel like a lot kind of vanilla rock in terms of a lot. They kind of feel like vanilla rock in terms of a lot how a lot of that sound kind of goes. I think that the concept behind it was this is a very much vanilla rock kind of album. It doesn't have like the kind of alternative metal edge. It's not really punk, and it's not really gothic, and it's not really super alternative. It just kind of feels like a staple of like vanilla type radio for that type of stuff. This is one of the most kind of factory and stock kind of ones. It doesn't have like the kind of gothic kind of metal type stuff of Marilyn Manson and Orgy and Rob Zombie and some of that type of stuff. And it's just not quite as punk and kind of skateboard esque as No Doubt. And it's not really, like punk like Blink 182 and Good Charlotte and some of those type bands. And it's not really as edgy and just quite as like raw as like Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit and stuff. So it's just kind of more of like a seminal kind of this like stock kind of blue collar, but also kind of vanilla rock album. But it does have some of that Nirvana edge. It just kind of maintains like a mild taste of like that alternative kind of fanfare is how that kind of goes. But it just kind of has it in a more kind of vanilla aspect as far as that would kind of be. It just was kind of like an amalgamation of trying to do like standard rock, post grunge, little bit of grunge left over. Wikipedia says that this album also did some punk rock in there and hard rock. I can kind of see the hard rock touches, but I don't really see the punk rock as much. But I kind of look after it is a pretty rock solid album, I just would have to say. So it did have 3 singles, like these kind of charted. Their later albums would really go on to make them like regular staples of like standard rock radio and that type of stuff. But I definitely look after that these initial 3 singles were the ones that it just felt like it just felt like these 3 singles off this album carved out the lane a little bit better than the 1995 album that Foo Fighters kind of dropped. It's just an overall good amalgamation of kind of getting that done. This happened pretty quickly. Like with this album and maybe like Foo Fighters' 1999 album, just within 1 or 2 albums, they were like a central kind of just face of like rock music for a good while, it seemed like. So that's definitely kind of the thing. They took over pretty quickly. So, I mean, this was definitely one that helped people get over grunge, to definitely kind of say that. But the 3 singles on this album were Monkey Wrench, Everlong, and My Hero, 2 of which, Everlong and My Hero, were particular staples that seem like they are pretty central to like Foo Fighters sets and that type of stuff. These are both ones that have a lot of lastability. And I looked online with Wikipedia. It said that basically one of Foo Fighters' signature songs was Everlong. So that's pretty awesome to kind of get that on this album. Just like the real kind of true, maybe not debut, but just like their breakthrough album in terms of like the early stages that this had their signature song happened that quickly. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about the first single first. The first single is Monkey Wrench. The first single is Monkey Wrench, and this single came out in the spring of 1997, a couple weeks before the album came out. Kicked off the album pretty well. Was probably like the worst performing of the three singles from this project, but it's not a bad song. It kind of gives me leftover vibes from Foo Fighters from like 1995 and stuff. Where this is kind of like an in between, definite kind of evening pep kind of tune. Just some late day work just ended kind of feels towards it. It's a good energizer and a nice bubbler for stepping out. This one just kind of has like good riffs on there and just kind of has like a quick tempo kind of feel towards it. It's just kind of one to kind of be excited and just kind of in a good mood as you're getting ready to go out and step out in those type moments. This kind of has like I want to say like a light, mild taste of grunge, but it really kind of is like an early kind of boiler for like standard rock radio that they would develop later. And this is kind of an early teaser for the sound that Foo Fighters would develop throughout the rest of the 90s and the 2000s, especially as that kind of went. It's just kind of like an in-between kind of song where it's not necessarily post-grunge, but it is just kind of like that typical kind of rave kind of energy that Nirvana would have in like their choruses and stuff, and just kind of that kind of pitch as far as that kind of went, with just kind of like a kind of hype, just definite for evening pep and evening venue kind of song as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of a good energy type tune for that, for how some of that would actually work. So I do like the energy of that one. Easy song to kind of get excited to, just in the car after work, that type of stuff, just kind of being thrilled and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just really like the hook on here. Just Monkey Wrench is a good single, good way to kind of kick off the album in terms of the highlights, but the other two songs outstripped it by far. So the second single is Everlong, and this song came out in like the summer of 1997. This is one that kind of probably was a pretty powerful song throughout the mid-late 90s. This is what I talk about with this album kind of being vanilla. I mean, the singles are not quite as vanilla. I would say the two vanilla rock songs would have to be Monkey Wrench and My Hero, where I feel like Everlong definitely had tastes of post-grunge on here. This was definitely one that seemed like a pretty revolutionary song that kind of helped usher in more sounds as far as that kind of went. This is one that didn't have like Nirvana after tinges and just that type of stuff. It just leftover products of like anything before 1997. Between like the late 90s and the early mid 2000s, post grunge was kind of starting to blow up, and these were some of the projects that kind of did that. But this is definitely a pretty highlighted post grunge song. I know that post grunge gets a lot of flack. People don't really like Nickelback that much, and people don't really like Puddle of Mud and Stained and some of those type groups that much. But this is a good example of like a pretty rock solid. And this the beat or the instrumentation on Everlong is very leering. This is a very leering evening pep kind of tune. Definitely like the nice post grunge type feel of it. It's a good traverse song, definitely a good song to kind of cruise around, especially in the evening as far as that kind of goes. It's kind of another good one to get you energized. This is an overall kind of good pub / night venue kind of song as far as that kind of goes. Just the energy on it is just really kind of pitch. I'm going to also add that the melodies on Everlong are really fantastic. This is just an overall leering song. This is a song that's worth purchasing the album just for. I mean, this song is that good to where you could just get this song and not like any other song on this project and just kind of have that for the aspect behind it. It's just an overall nice one. I can see it kind of being the signature. I can see this kind of being a signature song of Foo Fighters. Now, I don't know an overt amount of Foo Fighters. I know like a little bit of their first album and then this album that I'm reviewing, but I would have to say this is a pretty strong song and just an overall good one. This kind of has, like I said, good melody, good. This song just has good melody, good overall evening aspect as far as trying to get some of that done. It's good, nice pep for how that kind of goes. But yeah, so they're 2 for 2 with the singles here. I just would have to say Monkey Wrench and Everlong are both good ones. Monkey Wrench is a little bit more vanilla, kind of in the car, just kind of traverse, just with that pep as far as just got off work and just kind of the excitement of things getting ready to happen. And then Everlong's kind of like a more kind of post-grunge type tune, definitely kind of revolutionary song that kind of was like a good night venue type pub type song as far as that kind of goes. And then I would have to say that My Hero, this is the most vanilla of like the three songs. This one definitely had like a more kind of day-to-day, like I looked this song up and it said that Dave Grohl definitely saw this song as his hero, as being more like standard and ordinary type people, more so than celebrity type folks, just kind of talking about the workaday type feel. So this definitely feels like an anthemic kind of rock staple, definite kind of arena rock type tune. Lots of midday commute on this song. I definitely feel like this is just like a boiler for like the standard blue collar type fare. Just if you're needing like a workaday kind of song, this is a definite song with a lot of commute punch. And this is SFW, and it's a good song, good day song to hear. I feel like this is a good song when you're just kind of in the day-to-day format and workaday type feels. It's just a good song to kind of hear repeatedly and that type of stuff. I mean, I don't know if you're hearing it like 6 times out the week or 10 times out the week, something like that. If it has that kind of staying power, it's definitely a good highlight just for some standard kind of blue collar and white collar kind of fare as far as that kind of goes. But yeah, those are the three singles. Just to kind of say, like, I really feel like Everlong is a good highlight. Like I said, I can feel like this is an easy song to be a signature song of like Foo Fighters as far as that kind of goes. I really like the kind of just thrilling and exhilarating kind of energy of that one. And then Monkey Wrench is another one that kind of gets you excited, but just kind of does it in a more bubbly, kind of slight blue collar, but just kind of more evening kind of fare, more 6:30, 7:30 p.m. type stuff where you're already done with your job and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. That's just kind of the thing. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the rest of this album. So there are 14 songs on here. The version of the album I'm reviewing is where the 14th song is the title track, The Color and the Shape. Spotify has the iTunes bonus track on here, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and list the 10 songs out of 14 I recommend. So those 10 songs would be Monkey Wrench, Everlong, My Hero, Wind Up, Enough Space, The Color and the Shape, Doll, which is the intro song, My Poor Brain, Hey Johnny Park, and See You. So kind of talk about some of these. I feel like an easy kind of highlight on here, and this is just a real quick and snappy kind of song, is See You. This is kind of like a real nice coffee shop and early day type tune. This kind of has early day type pep on there. It's a nice kind of bustling song, and it's just very jivey. Just kind of has that feel of just like meeting a friend up for coffee that maybe you haven't seen in 3 or 4 years, something like that. Just that kind of aspect is just kind of being like a reacquaintancing kind of tune, just kind of in the standard bustle of how things go, just kind of regular commute where you just go to Starbucks, something like that. Just kind of an easy kind of jovial type one, just something that light kind of aspect. But I do like the overall jovialness of it. It's just kind of a nice, I mean, if you're not actually meeting up with someone, you're just kind of in like amidst the morning commute, it's just kind of a nice peppy tune to kind of give you a little bit of spark too. I feel like Doll is a nice one. This is one that's kind of more evening commute in my mind. I feel like in some cases, because of the sleepy and drowsiness of the song, I can see some folks thinking that this is kind of a wind down tune, but I definitely see it just because it kind of feels odd to have like such a sleepy and sluggish kind of song that's only like a minute and a half. So I kind of saw it as like a song that was kind of more one that just kind of gets you excited just because it's just so. I definitely see this song as like an evening kind of song, but it's just kind of odd to kind of have like songs like this that are just kind of like you're winding down, but you wind down in like less than a minute. So I think maybe it was intended to kind of have the opposite of that, where it's just kind of, or you just are kind of in the house trying to figure out like Doll just feels like a tidying up type song, just kind of crossing the T's, dotting the I's, getting that last little bit done as far as just like that pep for getting ready to just kind of have a little bit more sluggishness, just last couple of things to tidy up, and then you get ready to step out as far as that kind of goes. It just kind of feels for a down tempo song, it feels too quick and snappy of a song to be like a real kind of winding down kind of song. I just kind of felt like of that aspect about it. But I would have to say there are some songs on here that do kind of have some grunge like craziness. I'm going to get to those. So, but a definite kind of wind down song is Hey Johnny Park. This is definitely a late day commute kind of song. It's just a lazy kind of wind down song, similar to the stuff that Third Eye Blind kind of does and that sort of pitch. It's just very much a winding down kind of song and workaday kind of tune. There are some of those, like I do feel like those were kind of popular tunes for just that commute of just getting off work and just being swamped and that type nonsense. You don't even want to go and pick up like just After Effects and goodies, snacks, beers, that type of stuff. Just kind of where I'm just swamped today, not in the mood. I'm just going home. Hey Johnny Park's kind of like that. I kind of feel like, I mean, you could see Doll being either way, but I look at that one as one that would get me excited. My Poor Brain has a little bit more pep towards it. This is just a great energizer song. I really like the kind of falsetto vocals on this song. This has a real nice feel towards it. It's an energizer, definite kind of late commute song. This is another one that's like past 5:30, 6:30. So there's a good amount of songs that are just kind of after work in that sort of sense. And this is just kind of one for getting the last of the errands done. This is just kind of one for getting the last of the errands done, where some of these just kind of have the feels. I mean, not all of them are just wind down kind of feels, but just the aspect where I feel like My Poor Brain is definitely one that kind of has more of an aspect of getting ready to go have some fun and that type of stuff. So it's kind of good. It's kind of good to have songs for different days. Some songs you go home, some days you don't. That kind of sense as far as that kind of goes. Like I said, this is a seminal kind of late 90s rock album. So The Color and the Shape. The color and the shape, the title track is like a warped kind of tipsy night venue kind of jam. It's a screamo, high octane kind of highlight, and I definitely like the pitch of this song. This is definitely one for being in amidst the craziness and that type of stuff, having a few drinks in your system, just kind of enjoying like the night a little bit and kind of feeling it. It's kind of a song where you kind of feel the buzz a little bit and are kind of enjoying yourself a bit and that type of stuff. This kind of a screamo kind of energy. It's interesting to kind of get. This is one that kind of has like some Nirvana type vibes about it with that kind of screamo kind of chorus type stuff, or at least screamo in the verses as far as that kind of goes. It's just kind of like a pretty energized kind of song. It's different from some of the more like healthier kind of songs on this project, like My Hero and a little bit of Monkey Wrench and Doll and Johnny Park and some of those type ones. So this is definitely a good one. Wind Up is kind of like a good evening venue kind of fare. This is definitely one of the crazier songs on the album. It keeps up with like the color and the shape, the title track. Definitely some grunge type energy on here. This is another after effect of like some leftover grunge type feels. This one does not have so much of like vanilla rock type feels. This kind of a product of like the 92, 93, 94 type feels. Definite kind of old highlight, but I do like the concept of it. It's just a good evening venue. Just a good evening venue kind of bop for stepping out in like some pubs and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. And then Enough Space is kind of like a pub crawl kind of thumper. This has some good rave energy and like the hook, and it's just an overall nice quickie. Enough Space is kind of like a real nice pub crawl thumper, especially in the verses. This kind of has like that night fanfare kind of energy towards it. Definitely a good weekend stepping out kind of tune where you're going to have some wings and just beers and that type of stuff. Good rave energy in the hook. It's just an overall nice hit quickie. I really feel like the tempo behind that. This is just kind of a snappy song that just has the intention of just kind of being an in between. So it's interesting that this album managed to pitch out like the blue collar stuff with like the night venue stuff, and then just kind of have like the grunge tinge type feel of it also. So it's this kind of, there are some leftover sparky kind of vibes of like Foo Fighters from 95, but it's just kind of like a metamorphosis of an album that kind of starts to shed that and kind of have like more of like the aspects of like, not, I mean, there aren't many songs that do post grunge like Everlong, but it just kind of has like a more kind of vanilla rock feel towards it, where it just kind of has like a grunge tinge vanilla rock. So it's kind of alternative, but it's also kind of standard in how some of that works. Or I feel like songs like Wind Up and Enough Space and The Color and the Shape kind of have like that kind of late at night, kind of grunge-ish, but still kind of standard rock kind of feel towards it. I feel like songs like My Poor Brain, Hey Johnny Park, See You, and My Hero kind of have more of like that standard rock and blue collar kind of feel towards it. So it's just kind of interesting to get that. It's just a good kind of amalgamation. Some of these, you just get like pitches for how that kind of happens, and it just kind of has like, you know, day life, night life, both kind of amalgamations of how that kind of happens. So I just would have to say that's pretty good. So to talk about the 4 songs I didn't enjoy, which would just be February Stars, Walking After You, New Way Home, and then like Up in Arms. The reason why I didn't like 3 out of 4 of these songs I didn't like on here is because February Stars and Walking After You are both kind of more sluggish, kind of down tempo songs where they just couldn't capture the energy quite as well. I mean, I feel like Walking After You I reviewed on like the X-Files soundtrack, and that was a better crafted single, where on that album I almost gave it an almost song, or I gave it an almost song. I kind of feel like this one's just a lot more kind of a lot sleepier and a lot more kind of like festival kind of summer, just kind of benevolent, kind of super emotional kind of feel of it that's just different from the one on the X-Files soundtrack, and I just didn't quite pair up with that one as much. This is very kind of sleepy and just drowsy kind of, it's just very sleepy and emotionally charged as far as that kind of goes. It's just kind of more, I feel like these down tempo songs need a little bit more work in that kind of pitch. And it's the same thing with February Stars. That's just a very emotionally charged kind of song that just kind of had a lot more sleepy kind of down tempo feel that just didn't have like the spark and compellingness that I would have liked it to. And I didn't like Up in Arms because that was kind of like a mixture of like a down tempo and an up tempo song, where it's down tempo in the beginning and up tempo at the end, and that mixture, I don't think that down tempo and up tempo songs in the same song really work that well, so I didn't appreciate that one. And then New Way Home, I didn't like the production arrangements on that one. That one just didn't quite connect with the pitch as much for me. So that was kind of the concept there. Is just I didn't like the way that that song kind of turned out in terms of the instrumentation. Just didn't quite have the edge of some of the better riffs on here, like Everlong and like Wind Up and, you know, The Color and the Shape and some of those type ones, and My Hero and Monkey Wrench. So, but I would have to say, me liking 10 songs out of 14, I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 9.25 out of 10. I give this album the extra pitch as far as being a 9.25 instead of just a 9 because this is a pretty seminal and important rock album. Definitely did a lot, was ushering in like post grunge and getting people to step away from the grunge sound of like the early 90s and succeeding in doing it, having some hit singles that covered that ground and just did a lot of things. Kind of had some good party jams on here and a good social fare that just kind of could have been quieter and more kempt and more homely, but chose not to. Managed to juggle that with like a good blue collar kind of fare and just some good tunes that connected with a lot of audiences, and you have a pretty sparky kind of time. The social score I'll probably give like, oh, I would say a 10 out of 10. I think I'll go ahead and give the social score a 10 because all three of the singles did well. They have different pitches for how they kind of happen. They managed to usher in that particular sound and nail it. And it just has some good moments. I mean, it has like the pretty crazy night venue songs. Like I feel like Wind Up, Enough Space, and The Color and the Shape, and even My Poor Brain are all great, energized kind of songs just for a good standard night out and that type of stuff as far as just getting that in such a compact kind of format. And then the singles are all good. They all have connecting energy and we're all rock staples. So it's just good to kind of get some of those. Just a good social kind of affability as far as that kind of goes. And plus, there's some good meeting up morning commute tunes as far as being in the morning pep and malaise and that type of stuff. Good blue collar kind of stuff. So it's just overall good. In terms of the future, like Foo Fighters just dropped an album in June of 2023. So that's pretty interesting, kind of get that. I'm going to have to review some more of these. Like I said, I don't know a ton about Foo Fighters, but this is a pretty hit album. Definitely appreciate it. I'm just going to have to see what else they have to offer.